The Harley's final, guttural sigh dissolved into an abrupt, ringing stillness, leaving the afternoon air strangely hollow. Knuckles, a figure seemingly hewn from craggy stone and worn leather, dismounted with an easy grace that belied his bulk, his boots landing with soft thuds on the asphalt. The sun, a pale disk veiled by city haze, caught the gleam of chrome and the silver skull adorning his vest. He was halfway across the Rattlesnake Saloon's parking lot when a small, tentative voice pierced the quiet. "Sir?" He pivoted, his movement fluid despite his imposing frame, to find a girl of no more than 10 standing a few feet away. She clutched a crumpled paper, her wide eyes holding a flicker of apprehension as they met his. Her corn silk hair was pulled back in a haphazard ponytail, and an oversized t-shirt all but swallowed her diminutive form. Knuckles, well acquainted with cautious stares and outright animosity, softened his gaze almost imperceptibly. "Yeah, kid?" She extended the paper, her hand trembling slightly. Do you remember this address?" He took it, the rough edges brushing his calloused fingers. His eyes, typically a steely gray, quickly absorbed the handwritten street and number. The world seemed to lurch. Air abandoned his lungs in a silent rush. His face drained of color, an ashen mask stark beneath his weathered tan. A sudden, profound weakness buckled his knees, and he swayed. This wasn't merely an address. It was a brand, seared into the club's collective soul, a gaping chasm that had never truly closed. It was the place where Lucky, his closest friend, his brother, had been murdered 15 years prior. Unsolved. Dormant. Where did you get this?" His voice emerged as a harsh whisper, raspy with a grief that had lain dormant but never truly vanished. The girl instinctively recoiled a step. "We just moved in there. My family. We found something." Knuckles' heart began to hammer against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread, mingling with a nascent, terrifying hope. "Found what?" "A room," she explained, her voice gaining a fragile confidence, as if sharing a secret. "In the basement. It was hidden behind a false wall. My dad, he was looking for a leak, and he knocked through, and it was there, like a secret room." She paused, her brow furrowing slightly. "It had things, old things, and pictures." His mind reeled, a kaleidoscope of fractured memories flashing. Lucky's infectious laugh, his uncanny ability to mend anything with a wrench and a grin, the raw, visceral agony of discovering his body. A hidden room in Lucky's house. 15 years. "What kind of things?" Knuckles pressed, his voice taut with a fragile urgency. He fought to rein in his emotions, desperate not to frighten the girl away, not to unleash the storm of fury and sorrow churning within him. "A vest," she said, her eyes widening slightly, as if recalling its strangeness. "Like yours, but older. And a helmet. And a box. My dad opened the box. It had letters and a wallet. With an ID. My dad said the name was Lucky." The name, uttered by a child, oblivious to its profound significance, tore through him like a fresh blade. Lucky. His Lucky. The vest, the helmet, the wallet. The very items missing from the crime scene, presumed taken by the killer. A hidden room. Evidence. And there were other things in the box, too, the girl continued, unaware of the tempest she had unleashed. "Papers. My dad said they looked like notes, and a picture of a man. Not the same man as the ID. A different man. My dad said he looked like a bad man." Knuckles closed his eyes for a brief, agonizing moment, the scent of stale asphalt and the distant hum of traffic fading into oblivion. This was no mere ghost from the past. It was a phantom, clawing its way back into the present, demanding retribution. 15 years of unanswered questions, of restless nights, of a festering wound in the heart of their brotherhood. And now, a small girl, a stranger, had stumbled upon the key. The cold case wasn't cold anymore. It was igniting. He opened his eyes, the gray now shot through with a dangerous glint. "Is your dad home now, kid?" She nodded, clutching the paper tighter. "He told me to come find someone from the club. He said you guys would want to know." Knuckles knelt, bringing his imposing frame closer to her level. "What's your name, little bird?" "Lily." "All right, Lily," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the earthquake rumbling beneath his calm exterior. "You've done a brave thing. You tell your dad Knuckles is coming, and he's bringing the whole damn club with him." He rose, his gaze sweeping over the girl, and then narrowing on the address in his hand. The weight of it was immense, a burden of pain and promise. 15 years. The killer. They were finally going to find him. The secret room. The scent of damp earth and something vaguely metallic hung heavy in the air as Knuckles descended the creaking wooden stairs into Lily's basement. Each step echoed the tremor in his own chest. 15 years. 15 years of unanswered questions, of a gnawing void where Lucky used to be. And now, this kid, barely up to his waist, had resurrected it all with a single address. Lily, a small figure clutching a worn teddy bear, pointed a tentative finger towards a section of the rough-hewn stone wall. "It was here, behind the old shelves." Her voice was a hushed whisper, as if even the air remembered the secrets it held. The family, a bewildered couple named the Millers, stood a respectful distance away, their faces a mixture of apprehension and morbid curiosity. Mr. Miller, a man with kind eyes framed by worry lines, stepped forward. "We'd only been here a week, tried to clear out some of the junk from the previous owners. That's when we found it. A loose section of the wall, almost perfectly camouflaged." Knuckles ran a calloused hand over the now exposed opening. It was small, cramped, more of a crawl space than a room, but the air inside felt dense with forgotten time. A single, bare bulb, strung up by Mr. Miller, cast stark shadows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the gloom. He squeezed through the narrow passage, his leather vest scraping against the rough stone. The space opened slightly, enough for him to kneel. His gaze swept across the items within, and a guttural sound, half gasp, half sob, tore from his throat. There, neatly arranged on a rudimentary shelf fashioned from a plank of wood, was Lucky's old leather-bound journal, the one he'd carried everywhere, filled with his erratic handwriting, his plans, his dreams. Beside it, his silver Zippo lighter, distinctive with the club's snarling wolf etched into its surface. It was pristine, unmarred by the years. And his watch, a heavy chrome beast that Lucky had always worn, now lay silent, its hands frozen at 2:15. Knuckles picked up the journal, his fingers trembling. The leather was cool, surprisingly smooth. He flipped it open, the pages stiff but intact. The last entry, dated the day Lucky disappeared, was a series of frantic, almost illegible notes. Names, fragments of conversations, a repeated phrase, the serpent's coil. "We didn't touch anything else," Mrs. Miller said from the entrance, her voice hushed. "Just the journal, to see if it belonged to anyone. That's when we saw his name, Lucky, scribbled on the first page." Knuckles ignored her, his eyes scanning the cramped space. Beyond the shelf, tucked into a small recess, was a tarnished metal box, He reached for it, his heart hammering against his ribs. It wasn't locked. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, were more treasures. A stack of old photographs, black and white, showing a younger Lucky, his grin wide and unburdened, standing with Knuckles and other club brothers. And then, at the bottom, a folded piece of parchment, brittle with age. He carefully unfolded it. It was a crude map, hand-drawn, showing a section of the local forest, crisscrossed with lines and marked with an X. Beside it, a single dried rose, its petals a ghostly white, almost disintegrated at his touch. The chill in the air intensified, but it wasn't from the basement's dampness. It was the icy grip of 15 years of grief and unanswered questions, now thawing, giving way to a burning need for vengeance. Lucky had been meticulously documenting something he knew was dangerous. The hidden room wasn't just a place where his belongings were stored. It was a sanctuary, a secret vault for information he couldn't risk falling into the wrong hands. He was planning something, Knuckles muttered, his voice rough with emotion. He was onto them. Mr. Miller cleared his throat. There was one more thing. We found it when we were trying to clear the rubble from the wall. It was wedged deep, almost out of sight. He extended a gloved hand, holding out a small, intricately carved wooden figurine. It depicted a serpentine creature, its body coiled, its fangs bared. Knuckles stared at it, a cold dread seeping into his bones. The serpent's coil. The words from Lucky's journal echoed in his mind. This wasn't just a random murder. It was something far more sinister, a web that Lucky had stumbled into. And now, Knuckles was about to pull at its threads. The Forgotten Room wasn't just a discovery. It was a gauntlet thrown, a silent challenge from the grave. A call to the Brotherhood. The roar of Knuckles' Harley-Davidson shattered the morning's quiet, a metallic snarl that echoed through the otherwise sedate suburban street. He wheeled the beast into Lily's driveway, the chrome gleaming under the nascent sun. He didn't cut the engine immediately, letting the vibrations hum a low, guttural note against the asphalt, a prelude to the storm brewing within him. Lily met him at the garage door, her face a map of concern. "Knuckles, what did you find?" she asked, her voice hushed, as if the very air might carry their secrets. He dismounted, the leather of his vest creaking, the weight of the moment pressing down. "Everything, Lil. Everything." He pulled the worn journal from his inner pocket, the dried rose still tucked between its pages. The scent of old paper and dust mingled with a faint, sweet decay. Dusty memories. The journal felt heavy in Knuckles' calloused hand, a silent testament to secrets held and truth sought. Lily's eyes, wide and expectant, mirrored the rising sun, reflecting the hopeful glint in his own. He offered her the slim, leather-bound book, its cover faded with age, the dried rose a fragile sentinel between its pages. This is it, kid," he rumbled, his voice rougher than usual. "Everything." Lily took the journal, her small fingers tracing the embossed lettering on the cover, a stylized serpent, its tail coiled around a skull. She flipped it open carefully, the spine groaning in protest. The air in her small living room, usually filled with the scent of toast and her mother's floral perfume, now seemed charged with the dusty aroma of old paper and forgotten time. "He called it the serpent's coil," Knuckles explained, watching her face. "His notes, his investigations. It's all in there. Every detail he uncovered about that damn organization." Lily's brow furrowed as she scanned the elegant, looping script. "He wrote a lot, didn't he?" Lucky was meticulous, Knuckles affirmed, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. He didn't miss a trick, never did. He paused, the memory of his friend sharp and poignant. He was tracking them, Lily. Tracking the serpent's coil for months before he was taken. The weight of that unspoken ending hung heavy between them. Lily, sensing the shift in his demeanor, carefully turned a page. What exactly was the serpent's coil? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Knuckles leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. A network, involved in everything from protection rackets to drug trafficking, even some dirty politics. They had their hooks in deep all over the city. Lucky was trying to expose them, trying to bring them down from the inside. His gaze drifted to the window, to the mundane street outside, but his mind was elsewhere. Replaying conversations with Lucky, piecing together fragments of a dangerous puzzle. He watched Lily pore over the journal, her expression shifting from curiosity to growing understanding. She paused on a page filled with diagrams and cryptic symbols. He drew a lot of strange things, she observed, pointing to a sketch of a building with an elaborate ventilation system. That's the old abandoned factory on the edge of town, Knuckles supplied, his tone sharpening. Used to be a textile mill. Lucky suspected they were using it as a central hub, a place to store their goods, or maybe even for their meetings. He remembered Lucky talking about late-night surveillance, about the strange comings and goings at the derelict property. Lily continued to turn pages, her progress slow and deliberate. She stopped abruptly on a list of names, some crossed out, others underlined. Who are these people? She asked, her voice tinged with a new kind of apprehension. Potential members, associates, targets, Knuckles said, his eyes scanning the familiar names. Some were faces he recognized from the city's underbelly. Others were less known. Lucky was building a roster, trying to figure out who was connected to whom, how the whole thing worked. He felt a renewed surge of urgency, a burning desire to understand the full scope of Lucky's investigation. The journal wasn't just a record, it was a map, a guide to the truth. He saw Lily's small hand tremble slightly as she held the journal. The innocence that had initially drawn him to her was still there, but now it was tinged with the shadow of Lucky's dangerous world. He knew he had to be careful, to protect her, even as she became an unwitting part of his quest. There's something else, Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. She pointed to a section of the journal where Lucky had meticulously detailed a series of coded messages, referencing specific dates and locations. He wrote about a final drop and a grand unveiling. Knuckles felt a jolt. The final drop. That must be the big score he was talking about. The one that would expose them all. He was so close. His mind raced, connecting the dots, remembering Lucky's excitement, his conviction that he was on the verge of something monumental. He reached out, gently taking the journal from Lily. He flipped to the back, to the very last page. There, in Lucky's elegant script, were just 2 words, underlined twice. The Watcher. Below it, a date, just a few days after Lucky's murder. A cold dread settled in Knuckles' stomach. The Watcher, he repeated, the name unfamiliar, yet ominous. He was still working, even then. He must have had someone on the inside, someone feeding him information. Lily looked at him, her eyes wide, with a mixture of fear and determination. We have to find out who the Watcher is, don't we? Knuckles nodded slowly, his jaw tight. The puzzle was far from complete. The journal was a beginning, not an end. It was the torch Lucky had passed, and now it was up to him to carry it, to illuminate the shadows and finally bring Lucky's killers to justice. The road ahead was still dark, still dangerous, but with Lucky's meticulous findings guiding him, Knuckles felt a renewed sense of purpose. The dust of memory had been stirred, and with it, the truth was slowly beginning to emerge. Slash's legacy. Slash's legacy. The late afternoon sun filtered through the grimy windows of Knuckles' garage, cast long, distorted shadows across the concrete floor. Lily sat cross-legged on an old oil drum, the journal open in her lap, her brow furrowed in concentration. Knuckles, a wrench abandoned beside a disassembled engine, leaned against a workbench, his gaze fixed on the meticulous script of Lucky's entries. The silence, punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic, felt heavy with the weight of unanswered questions. He was obsessive, Lily murmured, tracing a finger over a series of interconnected arrows and coded abbreviations. Everything is so precise. That was Lucky, Knuckles grunted. Always had a plan. Always saw things others missed. He ran a hand over his chin, the stubble rasping. The factory. The final drop. It all points to something big, and the Watcher. That's new. He was getting close, wasn't he? Lily looked up, her blue eyes wide, to exposing them. A knot tightened in Knuckles' gut. Too close, maybe. The thought of Lucky, alive and vibrant, pursuing justice, only to be silenced, was a fresh wound. This Watcher, it could be an informant or someone who got wind of Lucky's digging and decided to shut him up. Or both, Lily added, tapping the page. Look, the date next to the Watcher is a week after his last entry, and a few days before he disappeared. Her voice dropped to a whisper. A cold dread seeped into Knuckles' bones. Lucky hadn't just stumbled into trouble. He'd been targeted. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was calculated. We need to figure out who the Watcher is, Knuckles said, pushing off the workbench, and what this final drop or grand unveiling means. If we can get a clearer picture of their operation, we might find a way in. Lily nodded, her small face serious. He mentions a few names in here. People he was tracking. Silas, Mara, and the Butcher. Do you know any of them? Knuckles shook his head. Doesn't ring a bell. But the club has eyes and ears. We'll put out feelers. He paused, a new thought forming. Lucky had a knack for finding things, for getting information. He must have had sources, people he trusted. We need to find them. There's something else, Lily said, her voice hesitant. In the back of the journal, tucked into a hidden pocket. She carefully extracted a folded, brittle piece of paper. It was a crude map, drawn in Lucky's distinctive hand, with several locations circled. One, marked with a skull and crossbones, was the abandoned factory. Another, a simple X, was labeled Slash's legacy. Knuckles frowned, taking the map. Slash. That's an old-timer. Used to run with a rival club, the Iron Vipers. Died years ago. Heart attack in his sleep, or so the story went. Why would Lucky be looking into him? It says legacy, Lily pointed out. Maybe it's not about Slash himself, but something he left behind. A memory stirred in Knuckles' mind. A faint whisper from years ago. Slash, for all his gruff exterior, had been a meticulous record keeper, known for stashing his ill-gotten gains and sensitive information in unexpected places. Slash was a paranoid old bastard, Knuckles mused, his eyes narrowing. Always hiding things, just in case. What if Lucky thought he found a connection between Slash and The serpent's coil. The map shows a location in the old industrial district, Lily said, pointing. An abandoned warehouse near the docks. That area's a ghost town now, Knuckles said, a flicker of excitement igniting in his chest. Perfect place for a secret stash. If Lucky went there, he might have found something important. Something that tied everything together. The idea, though speculative, felt right. Lucky didn't chase ghosts. He chased facts. For him to mark this location, it had to hold significance. We need to check it out, Knuckles declared, a surge of renewed purpose coursing through him. Tomorrow. You stay here, Lily. This could be dangerous. Lily's jaw firmed. No. Lucky trusted me with his journal. I'm coming. I can help. I'm good at finding things. Knuckles looked at her, at the fierce determination in her young eyes, a reflection of Lucky's own unwavering resolve. He hesitated, then sighed. All right, but you stick by me. No heroics. And if things get hairy, you disappear. Understand? Lily nodded, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. Understood. As the last rays of sunlight faded, casting the garage in an eerie twilight, Knuckles felt a shift. The cold case, for so long a heavy shroud, now felt like a puzzle, piece by piece revealing a clearer picture. Slash's legacy. It was another thread in the tangled web, another breadcrumb from Lucky, guiding them closer to the truth, closer to the heart of the serpent's coil. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in 15 years, Knuckles felt a genuine sense of momentum, a tangible path forward, illuminated by the unwavering spirit of his lost friend. The hidden message. The oppressive humidity of the industrial district clung to them, a palpable weight that made the air thick with the smell of rust and decaying concrete. Lily, her small hand gripping the strap of her backpack, stayed close to Knuckles as they navigated the labyrinthine streets. The sun, a hazy orange disk, cast long, distorted shadows from the skeletal remains of forgotten factories. Each distant clang and groan from the working plants echoed with a hollow sense of unease. This is it, Knuckles rumbled, his voice low, a gravelly counterpoint to the chirping crickets that had just started their evening chorus. He pointed to a sprawling, dilapidated structure, its windows boarded over, the paint peeling like sun-scorched skin. Slash's legacy. The map, scrawled in Lucky's familiar hand, had been precise. Lily's gaze swept over the building, her brow furrowed. It doesn't look like much, just old. That's the point, Knuckles said, pushing open a warped chain-link fence that groaned in protest. Nobody looks twice at places like this. Perfect for hiding things. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of mildew, and something metallic, a faint tang that prickled Knuckles' nose. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the gaps in the boarded windows, illuminating the forgotten relics of past industry. Rusted machinery, collapsed shelving units, and tarpaulin-covered mounds of indeterminate junk. The floor crunched underfoot, with broken glass and scattered debris. They moved slowly, Knuckles' flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, painting fleeting patterns on the grimy walls. Lily, despite her earlier insistence, now walked with a noticeable tension in her shoulders, her eyes wide as she absorbed the eerie silence. Lucky wouldn't have left anything obvious, Knuckles murmured, more to himself than to Lily. He was too smart for that. He swept the beam across a graffiti-scarred wall. Slash was a hoarder, though. Kept everything. After 10 minutes of fruitless searching, a flicker of frustration crossed Knuckles' face. Damn it, Lucky. Give me a sign. Wait, Lily said, her voice barely a whisper. She pointed to a section of wall where a large, faded mural of a snarling wolf had been partially obscured by a newer, more amateurish, spray-painted tag. "Look there! The wolf's eye." Knuckles redirected the flashlight. At first he saw nothing but cracked paint. Then, as he adjusted the angle, a faint, almost invisible etching became visible within the iris of the painted wolf. It was a small, crudely drawn symbol, a serpent coiled around a dagger. "The serpent's coil," Lily breathed, her voice filled with a mixture of apprehension and triumph. Knuckles' heart hammered against his ribs. "Good eye, kid." He ran a gloved finger over the symbol. "This isn't just graffiti. This is a marker." He pressed his hand against the wall around the symbol, feeling for any give, any subtle difference in the texture. Nothing. "Maybe it's not on the wall," Lily suggested, her mind racing. "Maybe it's behind it." Knuckles paused, considering. Smart. Slash wouldn't have wanted a straightforward hiding spot. He moved to a stack of rusty oil drums nearby. With a grunt, he began to roll them aside, the metallic scraping echoing through the cavernous space. Behind them, obscured by years of grime and stacked junk, was a section of the wall that looked subtly different. The concrete seemed newer, less weathered than the surrounding surface. He pulled out a small crowbar from his belt and began to pry at the edge of the disguised panel. It resisted, groaning, but with a final, sharp crack, it came loose, revealing a dark, narrow cavity. Knuckles aimed his flashlight inside. The beam illuminated a small, sturdy metal box, nestled snugly within the hidden compartment. It was dusty, but otherwise intact. "We found it," Lily whispered, her eyes shining with excitement. Knuckles carefully retrieved the box. It was heavy, surprisingly so. He noticed a small, intricately carved symbol etched into the top. The same serpent and dagger. This was definitely Lucky's. He fumbled with the clasp, his fingers trembling slightly. The box opened with a soft click, revealing its contents. Inside, meticulously organized, were several items. A stack of worn photographs, a small, leather-bound notebook, a set of keys on a tarnished silver ring, and a single, sealed envelope, thick with what felt like paper. Knuckles picked up the photographs first. They were grainy, taken from a distance, but the faces were recognizable. Men he knew, men from the periphery of their world, always lurking, always connected to the darker dealings. He recognized a few faces that were now dead, others who had simply disappeared. He saw images of a desolate, rocky landscape and a few close-ups of specific unmarked vans. Lucky had been thorough. Next, the leather-bound notebook. It was a separate journal from the one Lily had found in the house, smaller, more discreet. Its pages were filled with Lucky's precise, cramped handwriting, detailing dates, locations, and cryptic references to shipments and routes. Knuckles' eyes scanned for any mention of the serpent's coil or the Watcher. He found it, a chilling entry. Watcher confirmed. Serpent's coil closing in. Final drop imminent. He moved to the keys. There were 3 of them. A standard house key, a smaller, older-looking key, and a tiny, almost ornamental key, intricately carved. He recognized the house key immediately. It was for the old safe house Lucky had occasionally used, a small forgotten cabin deep in the woods, miles from the city. Knuckles felt a jolt of realization. Lucky hadn't just been investigating from a distance. He'd been preparing. Finally, the sealed envelope. Knuckles' hands hesitated. This felt like the core of it, the culmination of Lucky's relentless pursuit. He carefully tore it open. Inside were several folded sheets of paper. The first was a detailed, hand-drawn map, more intricate than the one Lily had found, showing a series of underground tunnels and old service routes beneath the city. The second was a list of names, each accompanied by a brief, chilling description of their role within what Lucky had clearly identified as the Serpent's Coil. And then, at the bottom of the envelope, was a single, larger sheet of paper, folded in half. Knuckles unfolded it, his breath catching in his throat. It wasn't a map, or a list, or even a journal entry. It was a photograph. A blurred, slightly out-of-focus image, taken in poor lighting, but undeniably clear enough to identify the subject. It was a man's face. A face Knuckles knew. A face he had last seen at Lucky's funeral. A face that now stared back at him from the photograph. A faint, unsettling smirk playing on his lips. Knuckles' blood ran cold. The man in the photograph was none other than Silas Thorne, the club's former treasurer, a man who had vanished shortly after Lucky's murder. And beneath the photograph, in Lucky's unmistakable hand, a single, damning word was scrawled: Watcher. Piecing the puzzle. The metal box was a treasure chest of secrets, each item a thread in the tangled web of Lucky's last days. Knuckles and Lily knelt amidst the dust and shadows of the factory, their minds reeling from the revelations. The photographs of the shadowy figures were grainy, faces indistinct, yet the menace they exuded was palpable. Lily, tracing a finger over one of the images, shivered. These people, they don't look friendly, she murmured, stating the obvious. Knuckles grunted in agreement. No, they don't. Lucky must have been deep inside whatever this Serpent's Coil is. He picked up the notebook, its cover worn smooth from handling. The pages were filled with Lucky's distinctive, sprawling script, detailing shipments and routes that were clearly not legitimate cargo. Drugs, Knuckles muttered, the word a bitter taste on his tongue. That's what this looks like. Lucky was tracking a drug operation. Lily's eyes widened. The Watcher, Silas Thorne. He was the treasurer. Does that mean he was involved in the money side of this? Most likely, Knuckles confirmed, his gaze fixed on Silas Thorne's photograph. The man's face was unremarkable, almost forgettable, which, in hindsight, made him even more sinister. Treasurer for a motorcycle club doesn't usually involve drug shipments. This was something else entirely. Something Lucky stumbled onto. He unfolded the map of underground tunnels, the lines etched with a precision that spoke of careful planning. These tunnels, they're under the city. Lucky mapped out access points, escape routes. He was preparing for something, or protecting himself. Lily pointed to a section of the map near the docks. Look, this area is circled, and there's a note, Warehouse 13, drop point. Knuckles leaned closer, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Warehouse 13. I know that place. It's been abandoned for years. Perfect for moving product discreetly. He clenched his jaw, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to align in a chilling pattern. Lucky wasn't just investigating, he was gathering evidence to expose them. The list of Serpent's Coil members was equally disturbing. Names and code names were meticulously recorded, some with small cryptic notes beside them. Silas Thorne, Watcher, was prominent, but other names stood out. Names Knuckles vaguely recognized from the periphery of the club's past. Old contacts, associates, men who had always skirted the edges of legality. These keys, Lily said, holding up a small set, 2 brass, 1 silver. Are they for the safe house Lucky mentioned in his journal? They have to be, Knuckles replied, taking them. He wrote about a place to stash his findings, somewhere off the grid. If we can find that safe house, it could hold the missing link. He looked at Lily, a grim determination setting in. We need to go there. Now. The urgency in his voice was contagious. Lily nodded, her small face serious. The thrill of discovery was now tinged with a growing sense of danger. They were no longer just following clues. They were actively pursuing a criminal network. They packed the contents of the metal box carefully, stowing everything in Knuckles' saddlebags. As they prepared to leave the factory, a cold draft snaked through the broken windows, rustling a forgotten tarp. The silence of the abandoned building now felt heavy, charged with the ghosts of Lucky's investigation. Outside, the setting sun cast long, distorted shadows across the cracked asphalt. Knuckles helped Lily onto the back of his bike. The roar of the engine shattered the stillness, a defiant sound against the encroaching twilight. Their next destination was the safe house, a place Lucky had hoped would protect his truth. Knuckles gripped the handlebars, the weight of the evidence they carried pressing down on him. This wasn't just about Lucky anymore. It was about the network of corruption he had uncovered, a network that had taken his life. And now, they were directly in its path. As they rode, Knuckles couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He kept glancing in, his rearview mirror, the shadows playing tricks on his eyes. The city lights began to twinkle, a deceptive veneer over the dark underbelly Lucky had exposed. Lily, her small body pressed against his back, occasionally pointed out a detail on the map, her voice clear despite the wind. Her unwavering focus was a stark contrast to the storm brewing within him. They were two unlikely allies, bound by a shared quest for justice, heading into the unknown, guided by the last testament of a fallen friend. The road ahead was fraught with peril, but turning back was no longer an option. The serpent's coil was unraveling, and they were the ones pulling the thread. Their journey took them to an unassuming street on the outskirts of the city, a quiet neighborhood of modest homes and overgrown gardens. Lucky's map led them to a small two-story house, its paint peeling, a for sale sign leaning crookedly in the yard. It blended seamlessly with its surroundings, a perfect hideout. Knuckles parked the bike a block away, and they approached on foot, the evening air cool and still. The faint scent of damp earth and decaying leaves hung in the air. Knuckles produced the silver key from the set. It slid into the lock with a soft click, and the door swung inward, revealing a small, dusty interior. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of old paper in disuse. This was it. Lucky's sanctuary, justice for Slash. The safe house, an unassuming rancher, blended into the town's periphery, its muted green siding almost consumed by overgrown foliage. Knuckles' gaze fixed on the front door, a formidable oak slab bearing the marks of countless seasons. Lily, clutching the map, directed his attention to a minuscule, nearly imperceptible keyhole tucked beneath the doorknob. Here, she breathed, a taut thread of anticipation in her voice. He inserted the brass key from Lucky's cache. A soft click resonated, magnified by the oppressive hush. The air within was stagnant, thick with the aroma of dust and neglected possessions. Knuckles flipped a switch, bathing the modest living room in a wan, yellow luminescence. Furnishings were sparse. A worn armchair, a dust-laden coffee table, and a bookshelf laden with technical manuals and binders. Lily's eyes swept the room, absorbing every particular. He kept it immaculate, she observed, a peculiar reverence in her tone, as if he fully intended to return. Knuckles gravitated towards the bookshelf, his attention snared by a particular segment. He extracted a hefty binder labeled Project Hydra. Inside, meticulous annotations, schematics, and photographs charted an intricate network of tunnels, marked with coded symbols and locales. He recognized several street names from Lucky's map. He was charting their entire operation, Knuckles murmured, the weight of Lucky's dedication settling heavily upon him. Every last detail. Concealed beneath the binder lay a small, well-worn, leather-bound journal. This one differed from Lily's find. It was older, its pages brittle. He opened it, revealing Lucky's familiar, precise hand. "This is it," he exhaled, a knot coiling in his gut. The serpent's coil. The journal chronicled Lucky's infiltration of the drug ring, his observations of Silas Thorne's chilling efficiency, and the disturbing revelation of Thorne's ties to local law enforcement. Lucky had suspected a corrupt officer, codenamed the Watcher, was feeding intelligence to Thorne. He had even identified a possible culprit, Detective Harding, a man known for his ambition and inexplicable affluence. A shiver traced Knuckles' spine. Harding had been the lead investigator in Lucky's murder. "He knew," Lily whispered, her eyes wide as she read over his shoulder. "He knew they were coming for him." Lucky's final entry was eerily prescient. "If you're reading this, they found me. Silas Thorne is the serpent's head. The Watcher's identity is in the warehouse. Look for the slash marker. Justice for Slash." Slash. Knuckles' jaw tightened. That was his nickname from their youth, a nod to the scar above his eye from a bar brawl they'd shared. Lucky had left him a direct message, a final plea for retribution. He looked at Lily, whose face was pallid but resolute. "Warehouse 13, she declared, her voice firm. "That's our next destination." The warehouse district was a labyrinth of corrugated metal and faded graffiti. Warehouse 13 distinguished itself not by its size, but by an unsettling stillness. No trucks idled, no forklifts whirred, just an oppressive quietude that whispered of abandonment, or something far more sinister. Knuckles parked his motorcycle a block away, tucking it behind a crumbling dumpster. "Stay close," he commanded, his hand resting on the pistol grip at his waist. Lily nodded, her small hand finding his, a silent covenant forged in the encroaching peril. The service door stood unlocked, a surprisingly careless lapse. Inside, the cavernous space was dimly illuminated by a few flickering fluorescent tubes. Stacks of crates lined the walls, casting elongated, grotesque shadows. The air was frigid, metallic, and carried a faint, sweet aroma Knuckles couldn't quite pinpoint. "Slash marker," Lily murmured, her gaze sweeping over the towering crates. Her eyes, sharper than his, alighted on a faint, almost invisible symbol, spray-painted on a stack of wooden pallets. It was a crude depiction of a motorcycle tire track, bisected by a jagged line, a slash. Behind the pallets, a small, concealed alcove led to a rusted metal desk against the wall. Upon it, a single, battered briefcase rested. Knuckles unlatched it, his heart hammering. Inside, nestled among burner phones and encrypted hard drives, lay a sheaf of official-looking documents. He flipped through them, his eyes widening. They were financial records, bank transfers, and confidential police reports, all detailing substantial sums exchanged between Silas Thorne and Detective Harding. Surveillance photos also surfaced, Thorne meeting Harding in clandestine locations, their faces grim, their expressions conspiratorial. "Harding!" Knuckles snarled, the name a bitter taste on his tongue. "That bastard!" The sweet scent in the air suddenly clicked. Acetone, a common solvent in drug manufacturing. He glanced at the crates, now seeing them not as mere storage, but as hidden compartments. "This is it," Lily whispered, her finger tracing Harding's name on a ledger. "The Watcher." A sudden clang echoed from the far end of the warehouse, followed by the distinct thud of heavy footsteps. Someone else was here. Knuckles slammed the briefcase shut, adrenaline surging. He pulled Lily behind a stack of empty barrels, motioning for her to stay low. Through a gap in the barrels, he caught sight of them. Two hulking figures, their faces obscured by the dim light, moving with an unsettling resolve. One wielded a heavy-duty flashlight, its beam sweeping across the crates, searching. "They know," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible. "They know we're here." Knuckles tightened his grip on the briefcase, his gaze fixed on the approaching figures. Lucky's last words resonated, justice for Slash. He possessed the irrefutable evidence that would dismantle Thorn and expose Harding. But escaping this place, alive, was an entirely new challenge. The game had just escalated. A story's end. The warehouse air, thick with the smell of dust and despair, pressed in on Knuckles and Lily. Thorn's men, a hulking trio, advanced, their faces set with grim purpose. Knuckles shoved the briefcase into Lily's arms. "Run! Get out of here now!" Lily hesitated, her eyes wide with fear. But the urgency in Knuckles' voice spurred her. She darted towards a rear exit, the heavy briefcase thudding against her leg. Knuckles met the first man with a guttural roar, a blur of motion fueled by years of barroom brawls and street fights. He ducked a clumsy swing, delivering a swift jab to the man's solar plexus, the impact audible even over the distant sirens that were beginning to wail. The second man, quicker and more agile, came at him from the side. Knuckles anticipated the move, sidestepping just enough to grab the man's arm, twisting it behind his back with practiced ease. A grunt of pain escaped the man's lips as Knuckles slammed him against a stack of empty crates. He didn't linger. He couldn't. Lily was out there, alone, with a briefcase full of damning evidence. He glanced towards the exit Lily had taken, a flicker of worry crossing his features. The third man, a brute with a shaved head and a snarl etched into his face, lunged. Knuckles ducked under a wild punch, retaliating with a powerful uppercut that snapped the man's head back. He followed with a knee to the gut, sending the man sprawling. Sirens were closer now, a dissonant symphony of urgent wails. Knuckles didn't wait for an encore. He sprinted after Lily, his boots pounding on the concrete floor. He burst through the back door, scanning the alleyway. Lily was a small figure, already halfway down the alley, her blonde hair a beacon in the dim light. She clutched the briefcase tightly, her small frame surprisingly resilient. "Lily!" he bellowed, his voice raw. She glanced back, her pace faltering slightly. But she didn't stop. Knuckles reached her just as a dark sedan screeched to a halt at the alley's mouth. Thorn, a sneer twisting his features, leaned out of the passenger window. "You think you can run from me, old man?" Knuckles pushed Lily behind him, shielding her. "Go, I'll handle him." Before Lily could protest, a squad car, lights flashing, careened into the alley from the opposite end. Thorn's eyes widened, and he barked an order to his driver. The sedan tires screeched as it reversed, then sped away, leaving a cloud of exhaust fumes and a lingering sense of dread. The arriving officers, uniforms crisp and expressions grim, quickly secured the scene. Knuckles, still breathing heavily, watched Thorn's car disappear, a new resolve hardening his gaze. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. A stocky officer, Sergeant Miller, approached Knuckles, his gaze sharp. "What happened here?" Knuckles recounted the events, omitting Lily's involvement as much as possible, focusing on Thorne's ambush and the retrieved evidence. He presented the briefcase, its contents a silent testament to Thorne's corruption. Miller's expression shifted from skepticism to a deep frown as he leafed through the documents, his eyes narrowing at the surveillance photos of Harding. "Detective Harding," Miller mumbled, a vein throbbing in his temple. "This is big." Lily, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. Lucky knew all of this. He was trying to expose them." Miller looked at Lily, then back at Knuckles, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He motioned to his fellow officers. "Secure the warehouse. Get a forensics team in here. I want every inch of this place dusted." He turned back to Knuckles. "We need to get you and the girl to the station. You'll need to make official statements." At the precinct, the atmosphere was a mix of controlled chaos and simmering tension. The revelation of Detective Harding's involvement sent ripples through the department. Knuckles and Lily were separated, each giving detailed accounts of their journey, the hidden journal, and the evidence. Lily, though small, spoke with an unwavering clarity that impressed the officers. She described Lucky's journal, the coded messages, and the meticulous investigation he had undertaken. Later, Knuckles and Lily were brought together in a small, sterile interview room. Sergeant Miller, looking weary but resolute, sat opposite them. "We've reviewed the evidence, the financial records, the surveillance photos. It's all damning. We've issued an arrest warrant for Silas Thorne and a warrant for Detective Harding." A wave of relief, profound and unexpected, washed over Knuckles. 15 years of gnawing uncertainty, of anger and grief, finally had a tangible path to resolution. He looked at Lily, a silent acknowledgement of their shared victory passing between them. "What about Lucky?" Lily asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Will they know who killed him?" Miller sighed, running a hand over his face. "With Thorne and Harding in custody, we'll have leverage. We'll reopen Lucky's case. This evidence, it ties everything together. We believe Harding was the Watcher, feeding Thorne information, protecting his operation. Lucky got too close, exposed too much." Knuckles clenched his fists, the anger a familiar burn. But this time, it was tempered with hope. "We need justice for Lucky." "We'll get it," Miller promised, his gaze meeting Knuckles. "Both of you, you've done something remarkable. This city owes you." As they walked out of the precinct into the cool night air, the streetlights casting long shadows, a quiet calm settled over Knuckles. The weight he'd carried for so long felt lighter, not gone, but manageable. He looked down at Lily, her small hand finding his, a silent gesture of camaraderie. "We did it, Knuckles," she said, her voice soft but filled with a quiet strength. He squeezed her hand. "Yeah, kid, we did." The journey was far from over, the path to justice often winding and treacherous. But for the first time in a long time, Knuckles felt a sense of purpose beyond grief. He had honored Lucky's memory, not just by avenging his death, but by carrying on his fight for truth. A new chapter was beginning, forged in the ashes of the old, with Lily, the unexpected catalyst, by his side. The serpent's coil had been exposed, its venomous grip loosened, and the story of Lucky, once a tragic cold case, was finally nearing its end.